Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Andrew Missick, pastor of King of Saints Tabernacle here in Cleveland, Texas. And one of the things that I want to speak of about Sukkot or tabernacles is how tabernacles was celebrated in ancient times. And there is a theory based on certain psalms. These are called the Enthronement Psalms. And the Enthronement Psalms are Psalm 24, 47, 93, 95 through 100. And we're going to look at some of those. These are about Yahweh being enthroned as king. And some scholars believe that these psalms they're songs, right? They were sung during a ceremony that perhaps took place during Sukkot, during the kingdom of Judah. And the idea is that the Ark of the Covenant was paraded through the streets of Jerusalem while people sang these hymns, and the Ark was taken and installed in the Holy of Holies in the temple. And this is all symbolic of Yahweh being the king, Yahweh being installed as king, Yahweh being enthroned as the king of Israel. So, as I said, there's many of these psalms throughout the scriptures, and including Psalm 93. And we'll look at that. For instance, this is a short psalm. The Lord reigns, or Yahweh reigns. He's clothed with majesty. Yahweh is clothed. He has girded himself with strength. Surely the world is established, so it cannot be moved. Your throne is established of old. You are from everlasting. The floods have lifted up, O Lord, O Yahweh. The floods have lifted up their voice. The floods have lifted up their waves. Yahweh is in high. He's mightier than the noise of many waters, mightier than all the waves of the sea. Your testimonies are sure. Your holiness adorns your house, O Yahweh, forever. I think that we see symbolism here because we know that there was a sea, right? The brass sea in the temple. So some of these psalms describe Yahweh as being enthroned between the cherubim, and I think that's also important. So we can read these psalms about that. And anyway, it's a very interesting theory that these psalms, the Enthronement Psalms, were sung. And we know that this ceremony took place. Scholars believe that it was an annual celebration. But we know for a certain that there was this ceremony of the Ark of the Covenant being taken and installed in the sanctuary. For instance, when David brought the Ark to Jerusalem, he erected the Tabernacle of David on the Temple Mount before there was a temple, and we know that David danced before the Ark. He perhaps composed some of these psalms for this occasion. And then the next time this would have happened would have been when Solomon's temple was completed, and the Bible describes that there was the ceremony where they took the Ark of the Covenant and they installed it in the Holy of Holies, in the newly built Temple of Solomon. And later we see, according to the book of Chronicles, that King Josiah, it seems like the Levites were taking the Ark from place to place, and Josiah says we need to take the Ark and put it in the Holy of Holies in Jerusalem. So we know the Ark was being moved around, and it needed to stay in its sacred place, the Holy of Holies. So it's interesting that we have these scriptures about Yahweh being enthroned between the cherubim. The scholars believe, based on archaeological evidence, that the cherubim, and we see it depicted various ways, but it seems like they were angelic beings that were like winged sphinxes. This is an Ark of the Covenant rendition created by my father. A theoretical approximation what the Ark of the Covenant looked like. We don't know 100%, but this is the idea of what the cherubim looked like. I want to mention something else that's very interesting, And this is from this book, Who Wrote the Bible, by Richard Elliott Friedman. And he discusses in here basically the book of Leviticus. This is about the documentary theory, and I know that's controversial. And the documentary theory is the idea is that there were 4 different accounts of the story of the Exodus, and from ancient times, and that Ezra, after the kingdoms had fallen away, Ezra searched out and discovered these 4 documents, and he merged them together as the Torah, the way we know them. An equivalent, something that it's like the theory would be like, imagine a world you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There's 4 different accounts. This actually happened. There's a man called Tatian the Assyrian. He took Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. He created a harmony of the 4 Gospels called the Diatessaron. So imagine a scenario where the 4 Gospels disappeared and all we had was the Diatessaron, and scholars tried to reconstruct the original 4 sources of the Diatessaron. But the controversy today is that many Bible-believing Jews and Christians believe the Torah is as it was written by Moses, including Hofmeyr, who's a good Egyptologist and Bible scholar, and he believes that the Torah represents, Moses wrote the Torah as it is. And when Moses found the Torah, he didn't find 4 documents and merge it together in the Torah as we know it. He just found the Torah itself, which had been misplaced. But there are a lot of people who are saying that, well, Moses didn't even exist. This is all a story that Ezra just made it all up. And in fact, people are saying, well, maybe the Maccabees concocted the Torah. Which I think these theories by the liberals are untenable. But they're espousing these theories. It's just I have a recent edition of Biblical Archaeological Review, and the author is stating that the Torah, Genesis, Exodus, and Numbers, and Deuteronomy didn't come to prominence until the time of the Maccabees. Richard Elliott Friedman is more of a moderate, right? He's saying, no, these accounts, which is JEPD, these are ancient accounts. These are reliable accounts of the story of Exodus. But then he does believe that Ezra took these ancient accounts and created a harmony out of them and created the Torah as we know it today. So he's not he's not a far left liberal denying the Bible. He's a moderate. So I'm not saying I agree with everything that he says. He's an interesting scholar, and he writes in a very engaging and readable way. But he has a section here about what the tabernacle looked like. And he's trying to say, look, this book, Leviticus, he's like, and parts of the priestly document in Exodus and as well, he's saying it describes the tabernacle, describes the temple, and temple worship. Why would they write about the tabernacle and about the temple when the temple had been destroyed? It doesn't make any sense. So these books have to be from, at least at the latest, in his opinion, from the kingdom. So in here he has a picture of the Holy of Holies, and Solomon built 2 giant cherubim that he placed the Ark of the Covenant under. And we have this picture, but one of the wings of each cherub touched the wall, and their wings joined in the middle. And he looks at various scriptures, and he argues that the tabernacle of Moses was actually could fit beneath the wings as it's described in the Bible, beneath the wings, the gigantic cherubim in the Holy of Holies built by Solomon. And if their wings were like forming a square, kind of a receptacle, the tabernacle could have been assembled beneath the wings of the cherubim. It says that Yahweh dwelt between the wings of the cherubim. There's a theory. The Bible describes the ark as being a throne because it was a throne, that the cherubim formed a seat. It was like, in ancient times you had a sedan. That's what the theory of the ark is. What's a sedan? You see it in some of these movies about ancient times where they have a box and somebody's sitting in the box and you got the people the servants carrying it with poles. And it's like, well, that's the idea of the Ark of the Covenant, is you had the box containing the Ark of the Covenant, but then you had a throne on top of that, which represented the throne of Yahweh. And I have seen, of course, scholars have excavated several of these thrones, cherubim-shaped thrones. They represent the archaeological record, and I actually saw several when I was in Lebanon at the museum. So we see this correlation between the temple and the tabernacle and the temple. And what Richard Elliott Friedman is arguing is perhaps the temple, the tabernacle was assembled inside the temple. That the temple was a structure that sheltered the actual original tabernacle of Moses. But I think that perhaps a more logical theory would be that the temple was assembled and disassembled, but perhaps they assembled the tabernacle within the temple during the Feast of Sukkot, during the Feast of Tabernacles, when they had this ceremony to install the Ark of the Covenant. So he has various, so this is on page 182 of this book. He mentions the space under the wings of the cherubim would be 20 cubits long, the length of the Holy of Holies, 10 cubits high, and less than 10 cubits wide, because the body of the cherubim would take up some of the center space. The measurements of the tabernacle would match those of the most sacred space, or the Holy of Holies, the space of the wings of the cherubim inside the Holy of Holies. This is the first clue to him that the tabernacle was actually in the first temple. But I'm thinking he's onto something, but perhaps, like I was saying, during the Feast of Tabernacles, they would actually take the tabernacle of Moses, which is obviously stored in the temple. They would take it and they'd assemble it during this feast inside the temple. He mentions 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles, which says, "And they brought up the ark of Yahweh and the tent of meeting and all the holy implements that were in the tent." It says Josephus says the same thing, that the tabernacle of Moses itself was stored in the temple, but it's possible that it was assembled in the temple, at least during the Feast of Tabernacles. So he talks about this. You have this parallelism in Hebrew. It's a poetic structure. A lot of Hebrew language has parallelism, like from the heavens, the earth, things like that. So we see here, for instance, he has some Psalms here to give an example. This is Psalm 26:8. Yahweh, I love your house, the place of your glory's tabernacle. So we see house and tabernacle as they're associated. Then we have Psalm 27:4-5, also connects the tabernacle with the sacred tent. I ask one thing of Yahweh, and that shall seek, that I may dwell in Yahweh's house all the days of my life, to envision Yahweh's beauty and visit his temple. For he will conceal me in his pavilion in the day of trouble, and he'll hide me in the cover of his tent. So we see a connection between the temple and the tent, right? Here God's tent is in parallel, the tabernacle is in parallel, not with the temple, but with that which is hidden by the wings, which fits the arrangement of the tabernacle under the wings of the cherubs, or the cherubim, which, like I said, perhaps during tabernacles, they would, for the 8 days, they would assemble the temple, the tabernacle within the temple. It says, even the psalm that mourns the destruction of the temple, Psalm 74:7, refers to tabernacle. They cast your sanctuary into the fire, they profane your name's tabernacle to the ground. Again, this translation makes this, they have profaned the dwelling place of your name to the ground, not knowing but to make a reference of the tabernacle at the time of destruction. But the book of Lamentations, chapter 2, verse 67, also refers to the destruction of the tabernacle at that time. So it seems like the tabernacle was preserved within Solomon's temple, but when the temple was destroyed, they destroyed the tabernacle of Moses. So we see several verses with that in there. And then he says, a tent inside the building is not as strange as it might seem. If ancient Israel had a tabernacle that was its most sacred shrine for years, decades or centuries perhaps, and was traditionally associated with Moses, they could hardly just discard it once the temple was built. What do you do with a structure that is valued in your tradition and is regarded as the proper place for religious ceremonies? This is a fairly close analogy, might be the case of a bridal canopy used in weddings, but of course, you don't always have a canopy up, right? It's only used during the weddings. So perhaps during the Feast of Tabernacles, from the kingdom age of Solomon's kingdom of Israel, when the temple rituals were operating, perhaps during tabernacles. We not only had the enthronement ceremony where they paraded the Ark of the Covenant through the streets of Jerusalem, and then put it in the Holy of Holies in the temple, but perhaps during this celebration they actually erected Moses, the tabernacle of Moses, within Solomon's temple. I think that's very likely, and he's proposes a related theory in this book, Richard Elliott Friedman. And like I said, when we're defending the historicity of the Bible, he wrote a book on the Exodus, which I think is very good. Like I said, he takes a moderate position. He doesn't believe in the inerrancy of the Scriptures, but he does believe in the Scriptures and their historical reliability. And the reliability of the Bible is under attack, and I think that we need to defend the Scriptures. And I don't know, it's like you don't have to agree with everything Richard Elliott Friedman says, but I think that he's trying to help, right? He believes that the Exodus occurred. This historical and the biblical accounts are reliable, but like I said, he doesn't believe in the inerrancy of Scripture the way I do. But like I said, we need to examine and put forth as many arguments as we can to protect the reliability of the Scripture against attacks. Because like was it Finkelstein in Israel, this atheist, infidel, blasphemous so-called archaeologist who's, he uses his credentials as a scholar and as an archaeologist to try to, ridicule and disprove the Bible. So we need to have defenders of the faith, and I think that some of his arguments here are compelling, and I think it's very interesting. Like I said, we see these enthronement psalms, which I referred to, and the ceremony of installing the Ark of the Covenant, which is, at least we have 3 occasions of it: installing the Ark of the Covenant in the Tabernacle of David in Jerusalem. Later, Solomon installs the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies when the temple was built, and then Josiah also has the Ark placed where it ought to be, according to the Book of Chronicles and the Holy of Holies. So there's 3 times where they probably had this ceremony, but some scholars think that this was an annual ceremony. This is how they celebrated Sukkot during the Kingdom Age. That they would at least have the enthronement psalms. They sing these songs as they paraded the Ark of the Covenant through the streets of Jerusalem. In Ethiopia, they have a similar tradition called Timkat, which is during the Feast of Epiphany, where they do that. They parade their replicas, or these objects they have which symbolize the Ark of the Covenant. And they have supposedly an ark in Axum, somewhere in the region between Ethiopia and Eritrea. And during Timkat, they take their Ark of the Covenant, they cover it up with veils, but they have, who knows, maybe somehow an ancient historical memory of the Ark being paraded during a feast day was preserved in the Ethiopian tradition somehow, and this tradition of parading the Ark of the Covenant through the streets is still practiced today in the Ethiopian tradition, which is a Semitic. They speak a language related to Hebrew, Ge'ez, and their modern dialects like Tigrayan and Amharic, which are Semitic languages related to Hebrew and Arabic and Aramaic. So this is very interesting. So we're celebrating Sukkot. I think that these theories are very compelling. That during Sukkot they had this ceremony enthroning Yahweh as king by parading the Ark of the Covenant, which represents the throne of Yahweh, through the streets of Jerusalem, and installing the throne in the throne room of the temple. Temple means, I think the word for temple and palace are the same. It's Yahweh's palace, right? But then we also have the idea, which the theory put out by him. I don't believe the tabernacle was permanently erected in the temple, but I do believe that his arguments here are very compelling, and I think the most likely conclusion is that, when would be the appropriate time to erect the tabernacle? Well, during the Feast of Tabernacles, right? So I think that's what they did. I think that the tabernacle was stored inside Solomon's temple, and during the Feast of Tabernacles, the tabernacle was erected within the building. And they also, perhaps, during the ceremony, they would remove the ark and then, reinstall the ark, and they'd have the parade And it's all about the kingship and the rule of Yahweh over his people, Israel. Yes, you have the Davidic king, and you have the rebel kings in the north, but these are like viceroys, right? The true king of Israel is Yahweh himself. And that's what the ark represents, the throne of Yahweh. And like I said, I like my father's reconstruction of the ark. It's theoretical reconstruction. It's based on scholarship. It's very good. Maybe this is correct. But if it was shaped like a throne, or if it looked like this, either way, the ark represents the throne of God, the mercy seat, right? Perhaps it was called the mercy seat because it was a seat. And like I said, I looked at archaeological artifacts, including they found a dagger handle that shows a cherubim-shaped throne, I think from a ghetto. And like I said, when I went to, we see similar sacred thrones in the Temple of Eshmun, and outside of Tyre, and in like in the museum I saw these artifacts in Beirut during one of my many visits to Lebanon, which is a beautiful country. I love Lebanon. So I think it's very interesting. This is about how Sukkot, how the Feast of Tabernacles was celebrated in the Solomonic kingdom. So what I'm saying is, during Sukkot, while people are erecting tabernacles, they erected the tabernacle of Moses inside because it fit, according to Richard Elliott Friedman. The way the big, you have the large cherubim over the Ark of the Covenant, and the according to his measurements, you could fit the tabernacle of Moses beneath the wings of those giant cherubim that Solomon had made. So like I said, I doubt the tabernacle was permanently erected inside Solomon's temple, but I think it's very logical that, based on these scriptures, that it was stored in Solomon's temple, and during tabernacles it was erected during the 8-day feast. And part of the celebration was also taking the Ark of the Covenant, parading it. It's a royal parade, parading through the streets of Jerusalem, taking it to, installing Yahweh as king, praising him and acknowledging him as king through the Enthronement Psalms, which I read. And this is described when David brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, and also when Solomon built his temple and the Ark was installed. So if scholars are incorrect, and this wasn't an annual feast, we know it happened at least on 3 occasions. When Solomon brought the Ark to Jerusalem, when King David brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, the tabernacle of David, when Solomon's temple was completed, the Ark was installed within the Holy of Holies. And then later, when King Josiah gave an order that the Levites keep the Ark in one place in the Holy of Holies in Solomon's temple built by his forefather Solomon. So that's very, very interesting, something to think about during the Feast of Sukkot. So thank you, and God bless you.